There is truly nothing I will ever love more than Taylor Swift and books. So what more could you ever ask for than books based on Taylor Swift albums? Hi, I'm Meg. If you're new here, I read books and I'm gay, and that's about all we do here. This is a very simple video. I've seen quite a few like Taylor Swift songs as book recommendations, but I thought everyone has a favourite Taylor Swift album. Like, everyone has a ranking of Taylor Swift albums. So there is literally no more perfect way to get a book recommendation than based on your favourite Taylor Swift album. And I make Taylor Swift and books my only personality, so I could talk about this for hours. Obviously, a lot of this is just how I see Taylor albums, so please don't come for me if you see a Taylor album in a different way, but this is like the vibes and how they speak to me, and then how these books speak to me in a similar way. A lot of this is on pure vibes and atmosphere. But yeah, hopefully I explain each one in a good enough way that you're like, okay, that makes sense. Maybe you'll read some books based on your favourite Taylor Swift album. I love talking about books and I love talking about Taylor, so this is like the perfect video for me. I have like 5, I think, for each Taylor album. I'm going in chronological order, so is there any more perfect way than to spend your day than thinking about Taylor and how she relates to books? I don't think so. So of course we have to start with debut.
Taylor Swift. And he says, our song is the slam and scream door.
Little feral angry yee-haw Taylor. That's how I see debut. It's like naive, baby, angry, curly haired Taylor, as she should be. So the first book is That's What Frenemies Are For by Sophie Littlefield and Lauren Gershaw. This is like the level of petty I think Baby Taylor was. This book is. It's a rich people drama about corrupt men and their wives and their friends. And it gives me like, men are disappointing and I'm singing about it in a pretty blue dress. Like I'm in the teardrops in my guitar video. That's the vibes this book gives me. Next book is Burn for Burn by Jenny Han. Like, Jenny Han is the queen of GYA contemporary books. I love her so much. Her writing is so easy to read and so fun. Burn for Burn is kind of speculative. Like, there's a little bit of magical realism in it, especially as you get to like the later books, because it's a trilogy. As you get to the later books in the trilogy, there's a little bit of magic. But yeah, it's super quick. It's about female friendship and also kind of loneliness and finding those friendships. So it gives me all the coming of age, the outside, place in this world, I'm only me when I'm with you vibes. And also it's called Burn for Burn, so like with an album with Picture for Burn on it, how can you not recommend that book? Like, come on. Next is Geekerella by Ashley Poston. This book is so soft and it kind of has a special place in my heart because it's the first book I read where I was like, you know what, it's okay to be a complete nerd, it's okay to just love the things I love. That's the vibes this book gave. But the reason I think you should read it if Debut is your favourite Taylor Swift album is because, first of all, it just gives the vibes of baby Taylor, curly hair, singing about all the things she loves and writing songs about the things she loves. But also the love interest is called Darian. He's playing the character, like our main character's favourite character in a reboot of her favourite series, and they somehow like cross paths. But he is literally every guy Taylor Swift wrote about on Debut. That he is the personification of him. All the songs she wrote about guys on that album, you could attribute into this book. He just has that like Taylor Swift love interest vibe, if that makes sense. It's kind of enemies to lovers, so, and it's obviously, because the name Geekerella, it's a retelling of Cinderella. It's just a fun time. It's a fun romance, and I feel like that's what Debut is. It's a fun album. And that's kind of like the next book, which is called The Girl Least Likely by Katie, I'm so sorry if I'm about to butcher her surname, Katie Lautzenheiser, I think that's how you pronounce it. But a lot of Debut speaks to me about coming of age and about finding your place in the world, because obviously a place in this world, my song, and the outside, but like that growing up. It's a proper coming of age album, and I think obviously the best books for that are coming of age books, and this is one of them. It speaks of teenage angst and not fitting in and finding love, and it has that kind of like our song romance to it, with all the fun times of like finding yourself, finding where you fit in, like the outside. And Invisible, oh my god, Invisible, that video of her singing Invisible acoustic on the Rep tour, cry every time, but that's the vibes this book gives me. And the last book I think you should read if Debut is your favourite Taylor Swift album is Oh Pioneers by Willa Cather. This is a slightly different vibe to the other books. This isn't really like a coming of age YA fun time. This is an American, I guess, feminist classic. It takes place on the prairie and it's about a young girl who's interested to run basically the business that her dad, I think, ran. So she's in this very male environment. She's interested to do something that only men are really doing, and she's not only a woman, but she's very young. It gives me all the yeehaw vibes of country baby Taylor with her little fake Tennessee accent, and it just gives me all the feelings of like baby Taylor coming out into the world. You know what I mean? Like, she's paving her way in the music industry just like our main character does in Oh Pioneers. It has really beautiful writing, most importantly, and some really lovely critique on American society at the time. And it just, if you were ever going to listen to country music, this, I feel like, especially being British, if you're a British Swiftie and you're listening to Debut and the country music, this book is like the perfect companion. Fearless, fearless, my OG, my love.
Fearless, or see that I'm the one who understands you. Been here all along, so
You've got fairy tales, and she's a little bit more mature. She's had a bit more life experience with Fearless, and it's just, listen, Fearless used to be my least favourite album, and I was absolutely like dead south now. I was like, I don't like any of the songs, and then I listened to Tell Me Why, and the most yeehaw song I think Taylor's ever done, and I was obsessed, and I listened to all of Fearless, and now it is no longer my least favourite album. I do want to like preface this by saying I feel like Fearless OG and Fearless Taylor's version have kind of different vibes, so if I'm picking a book based on the vibes, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I feel like obviously Taylor's version is a lot more mature. I feel like the vibes are a lot softer, whereas OG Taylor and Fearless was like still a little bit feral. And I feel like the first book I've chosen, if Fearless is your favourite album to read, sums this up perfectly, and it is Again But Better by KRISTIN, which I have annotated within an inch of its life. But I feel like this is perfect for the difference between OG and Taylor's version, because the first part of this is like Shane's year, I think she does like a year abroad in a UK university, she's American. So the first part is that year, which is like Fearless OG, and then the second part is her getting to relive that year and do it again and get like everything she wanted to do differently she gets to do, which I feel like kind of works with Taylor's version, because Taylor gets to relive that. I kind of feel like it was Taylor obviously Taylor's reclaiming that era, she got to relive that era. That's what this book does. It also has a really sweet love interest and the kind of like, hey Stephen, you belong with me, fearless love that we all love. You kind of go into it thinking it's going to be a fun contemporary romance, and it's a lot deeper than you think, which kind of gives me Fearless Taylor's version vibes. So, and then the next one I had to choose, because you cannot have the album with Love Story on it and not do a Romeo and Juliet style book. So These Violent Delights by Chloe Gauntz. This is like if Love Story was an action movie. This is what this is. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but based in Shanghai, with magic, fantasy elements, knives at throats, and enemies to lovers. Of course, it's Romeo and Juliet. So like Love Story on crack. And I feel like you can't have an album that has that much Romeo and Juliet vibes without a Romeo and Juliet retelling. So you gotta read this. The next one is a lot softer, like track 5 White Horse vibes, and it is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This book deserves so much more love. It was really hyped up on like the OG BookTube days, but I haven't seen many people talk about it since, and it's really soft. It's a story of twins who they both like tell half the story in their words, as they don't talk anymore and something's happened between them so that they don't, but then this is their like making their moves back towards each other, and it just has that really soft coming of age quality that Taylor's voice has in the original Fearless, and like that songwriting storytelling that she does. That's the vibes this book gives me. And also, so Jude and Noah, the twins, you forget how young they are in this book because they have quite mature voices, and I feel like you forget how young Taylor was when she actually wrote and released Fearless. So there's that kind of vibe of growing up too early. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Anyway, this book is really soft and I really need to reread it. The next one is a book by one of my favourite authors. I talk about Break the Fall all the time on my channel because it's my favourite, but it is her newest book, which is Finding Her Edge by Jennifer Jacopelli. It is figure skating, so I'm just going to put that out there because why would you not want to read a figure skating book? But it is literally like, if Fearless is your favourite album because it is for the romance hoes, which it absolutely is, this is your book. This is your book. It has a long-time crush, it has fake dating, it has two love interests who, one of them is literally like Hey Stephen style love interest and the other one is superstar style love interest. Like he could literally, that song could have been about him. But it has I Stans. It's that typical romancy coming of age, but there's also a Taylor Swift reference in there because our main character's sister does a programme to a Taylor Swift medley, and specifically Gold Rush, and I was like, if that happened in real life I would lose all of my shit. So someone, some figure skater, please do a Taylor Swift medley. But yeah, for my romance hoes, that's that one. The last book for Fearless is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This, I have to say, is like Fearless TV kind of vibes for me because it's a lot more whimsical, it's a lot more fairy tale-y than I feel like original Fearless was. I mean, today was a fairy tale, it's on Taylor's version, so it's a standalone fantasy and it's basically a book about books, so what's not to love there? But it has a really gorgeous female character who goes through a lot of character development during the book, so she's almost a completely different character by the end of the book than she was at the start of the book. Which kind of like the Fearless era, am I right kids? Am I right? Like Taylor was very different from the start of the Fearless era to the end, mainly because she went through a lot of shit, but also so the atmosphere has all the whimsical, gorgeous like vibes of Taylor's version, like that album cover, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. There's a really dreamy love interest and yeah, it's just a really fun, romancy but also whimsical and atmospheric, and I really like it and I think you would really like it, and it has all the qualities I feel like the Fearless album has, this book also has, so enjoy. I never know how much I love Speak Now until I listen to Speak Now and then I'm like, oh my god, Speak Now is the best album Taylor's ever made. Recording, I will cry because I've hyped myself up for it so badly. But the fairy tale vibes, breakup songs on it are the most heartbreaking, but then there's also like the pop rock, like Haunted. The first couple of books are like really like obvious Speak Now books, if that makes sense, like the Enchanted vibes, the Sparks Fly vibes, that sort of fairy tale, like pretty dresses, badass girls doing badass shit in pretty dresses. That's what I feel like Speak Now is, and that's what these books are. And the first is Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. This is a sapphic retelling of Cinderella. What's not to love? But it's also kind of creepy, so you get like the haunted vibes in there. You get kind of like the Better Than Revenge because it's literally just about women taking down a patriarchal society, but with magic and gay romance. So like genuinely, what is there not to love about this book? It is incredible. It's a really fun, quick book. Creepy in the best way, like creepy dolls kind of creepy, which like who doesn't love that? And also look, it has the butterflies in her hair, so it's like Taylor vibes, right? But yeah, there's literally, I could sell you this book based on the fact that it is the songs Haunted and Enchanted and it's gay, so like it's the perfect book. The next book I genuinely did have a copy of, but I don't know where it is. I think it must be in the attic or like in a box of all my old stuff because it is not on my shelves anymore, but it is Splintered by A.G. Howard. There is a slight trigger warning for this one for some kind of dodgy mental health representation, like it's not the greatest. But to me it has the same nostalgic vibes that Speak Now has for me, because Speak Now is like the first Taylor album I remember. Like I was only like 6 when Fearless came out, so cut me some slack. And like I might only be like a Swiftie for the last like year, but I do remember Speak Now really, really clearly. So that kind of nostalgia, I hold the same sort of nostalgia for this book, which isn't the only reason I've chosen it, but it has more of that fairy tale coming of age feeling that Speak Now has. Again, Haunted. It's an Alice in Wonderland retelling, but like paranormal and with a guy like a Rhysand style love interest. Does that make sense? You'll know what I mean by a Rhysand style. But there's also a whole subplot of our main character and her mum, who is not very well, but that subplot is like the songs like Long Live and Never Grow Up, and also kind of Dear John. Like if Dear John wasn't about John Mayer, it wasn't about like family, that kind of vibe. Kind of like in the album where it's, you don't expect those sort of songs, you don't expect that sort of storyline in this book, but you get it, and it's great. And paranormal, Alice in Wonderland, nostalgic. It has all the ingredients that Speak Now have in a book, and it's sort of classic, I want to say like 2014 style YA, so it has that nostalgia to it, which, I mean, the next one, honestly, I know so many people must have read it, but if you haven't read it and Speak Now is your favourite Taylor Swift album, you absolutely have to read it. It is The Selection by Kira Cass. It is badass girls doing badass shit in pretty dresses. I mean, the cover literally is a direct match for Speak Now, so it's perfect. Again, it has the comfort vibes that Speak Now has for me. It has, I feel like this cover itself would fit on the Speak Now World Tour. Like the dresses that she wore on that tour give me these vibes. It's just a cute, fun time. Like if you listen to Speak Now because you want that nostalgia and you want the fun like love songs, but also like the, I don't know, like the Better Than Revenge, that sort of like pop punk, I just think this book is perfect for Speak Now. If you don't know what this is about, where have you been on BookTube? It's basically like The Bachelor, where they're in a dystopian sort of world, and like loads of women get chosen to go and live in the palace, try and make the prince fall in love with them. But this is about America's singer who already has a love at home and how she deals with that. It is Speak Now in book form. We've added OG, BookTube, Dystopia, like those trilogies are, I really do want to reread this because the comfort that these books, these were like the first YA books I ever read. I read them on my Kindle and I was like, and I read them all in like a day each because I was just obsessed. Yeah, that's the kind of comfort you need when you're listening to Speak Now, because that's what you listened to when you were a kid, okay? This one is also fairy tale vibes, because if you couldn't tell, I just associate Speak Now with fairy tales. But this is The Enchanted Sonata by Heather Dixon Warwick. This is a fairy tale retelling, but not one, I guess it's a fairy tale, like kind of, I guess it's a ballet actually. It's a retelling of The Nutcracker, which I've never seen done before, and I am so obsessed with it. It's so good. I read it at Christmas time and like the wintry, like snowy Russian vibes are just immaculate. The whole thing, it like really fits with Speak Now the song, because it is kind of like the narrative element of like our prince has his whole life planned out for him. He's got the person he's supposed to marry, and Clara is in Victorian London and she knows who she wants to marry and fall in love with, and then they meet, and then it has that last minute like, no, don't marry him, marry me vibes, which Speak Now of course. But yeah, the whimsical like fairy enchanted, I mean it has enchanted in the title, so perfect. But just that like, please don't be in love with someone else while you're like for the first meeting, like I'm smiling so much thinking about it because it is just such a perfect book and the vibes match Speak Now perfectly. The last one is a completely different vibe, but is like the sadder songs on the album, like The Last Kiss and the Dear John and Never Grow Up, which Never Grow Up I literally cannot listen to, like it makes me cry. But it's You Are the Everything by Karen Rivers, which I've never heard anyone talk about this in like a sad book recommendation, but oh my god, it will make you cry, it will make you feel things you didn't know you could. It hurt. It's about two people who survive a plane crash. They're the only two people that survive a plane crash, and they like fall in love, and it's that story, but then even more trauma is dumped on these poor characters, and it's how they deal with that. It's told in a second person narrative, which is quite interesting, quite unique, and I think the way a lot of Taylor's songs are written on the album are quite unique, so that has that interesting like narrative voice about it that Speak Now has. But yeah, this book is Last Kiss in book form, like that bridge, oh my god. Yeah, if you want to cry, listen to Last Kiss and read this book, and that's you'll be done. Red my love.
Remember when we broke up the first time, saying this is it, I've had enough, cause like,
but again, the kind of same thing stands with Red OG and Red TV are kind of different in my head. They kind of have different vibes. Whenever I think of like trying to explain Red, the album, to me, I always think of that message from Taylor where it comes up on your shuffle and she's like, musically and lyrically, Red resembles a heartbroken person. That's what I always think about. But I think she is completely right. Also, it has that complete duality of it, where the singles she released was so, like, it was her like foray into pop and whatever, and like the singles were so upbeat and so fun, and then you actually listen to the album and you hear songs like All Too Well, and you hear songs with like The Last Time, and it's like you've been punched in the stomach. And then especially with Taylor's version and the Vault songs. And I feel like a really good place to start is always when you're being sucker punched with emotion. One True Love's by Taylor Jenkins Reid, anything by Taylor Jenkins Reid gives you that sort of pain. I mean, you look at the cover and you're like, oh, this is going to be a fun summer read, and then you read it. A bit like Red. You listen to like We're Never Getting Back Together in 22 and you're like, wow, what a fun poppy album, and then you actually listen to it and you're like, huh? That's what this book is kind of like. Like, it has the really cute romance of like the very first night and Holy Ground and Stay, Stay, Stay. Oh my god, Stay, Stay, Stay. Some of the passages in this book. Stay, Stay, Stay. And you're having a great time, and then it all gets ripped away from you, because that's what Taylor Jenkins Reid does. And ripped away with the most heartbreaking twists and some of the most painful quotes I've ever read. So you literally go from Stay, Stay, Stay to All Too Well, and it breaks your heart, but in the best way, in the way we all want to. That's why Red is our favourite, right? Right. Anything written by TJR, all of her characters are so gorgeous and so fleshed out, and it's like she writes them just to break your heart. So you barely get to know these characters before she puts them through the gutter, and it makes your heart break all the same as if you've read them for like 12 books. So she will always be my favourite author, because no one else can mess with my head like that, in the same way that no one else can mess with my head like a Taylor song can. It's two Taylors, am I right? Taylors are the best. Just along a similar vein, the next book is Anna K by Jenny Lee. This is kind of obviously an Anna Karenina retelling, and if you know the plot of Anna Karenina, you will know why again. This is kind of similar to One True Love's in it starts out with such a fun, like, rich people drama, but like younger people in Manhattan, and there is so much money being spent, and you're like, I want to live this life, and then you remember you're reading an Anna Karenina retelling, and oh my god. So it starts with Starlight and it ends with Forever Winter. Yeah, there's a sequel to this now, and I still haven't read it because the ending to this book ruined me that much. But I will get around to it because it was so good. It has that balance of falling in love, of the pure joy of it, and also just heartbreak and grieving and sadness, and yeah. It deals with some really intense issues as well, so check trigger warnings before you read it. This book makes me want to read Anna Karenina so badly, but I've only just got a copy of it, and I feel like I'm reading so many other books I cannot justify starting it, so I might just reread this one. But it is so good. The next book is heavy trigger warnings. It is The Year After You by Nina DePass. It's about a girl who loses her best friend and then goes to a boarding school to try and deal with the trauma, try and carry on with her life while it feels like it's ended. It's mostly a story about friendship, which is really different because a lot of, you know, you think of the heartbreak of the Red album and you think of All Too Well and that sort of pain. Actually, like, Forever Winter is pretty much about a friend. So if Forever Winter, I said if Forever Winter and Everything Had Changed had a baby and it was a book, it would be this book. It is really sad. Like, there is a lot of hefty trauma in it, and there are just a lot of stunning moments and stunning quotes, which I feel like there are on the Red album as well. So if those sort of like nuggets of beauty are your favourite, you'll love this book. And I actually had to write a quote down from this book because it just gets in my heart, and it's, people always hurt people they care about. That's what makes it hurt so much. I was like, that's, if the sad songs on Red are your jam, this is your book. Whereas if the country kind of like vibey, you know what I mean, like the Taylor's version vibes of that cover from the Evermore shoot, like that cover is the vibes of this book completely. It is A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone. This is the first book I ever read that was like spicy but well written and well thought out, and the characters were brilliant, and it kind of was the first book that taught me that spicy books aren't just like 50 Shades of Grey, you know, like they can have nuance and beauty to them as well, and this book definitely does. It is spectacular. It is more rich people, it is culty, like there are like sexy rituals in this dark English town. Prosperina is a librarian, so that's brilliant. I Knew You Were Trouble was basically written about Saint Sebastian in this book, so that's really all you need to know, like, going into it. Culty, sexy, Saint Sebastian is who Taylor Swift wrote I Knew You Were Trouble about. And then the last book is a little bit more nuanced. There's a little bit more depth to this recommendation. I feel like Red is the bridging of the gaps between old baby Taylor, like I Still See Speak Now as baby Taylor, and coming towards like 1989 and Reputation, which is obviously a lot more mature and older, and that's like pop Taylor. And that kind of bridging of the gap, I feel like that's where Red sits in. And so this book is A Lonely Girl Is a Dangerous Thing, and it's kind of like a similar vibe to that. It's the bridging of the gap between coming of age YA and literary, like, adult fiction. Not in terms of how it's written, it is very solidly an adult book, but it's that sort of, when you feel like you're in that lull where you're just trying to survive, like you don't feel like an adult, but you're doing adult things. Does that make sense? Like, it's the story of Jenny, who is quite literally just trying to survive in New York after Trump's election. So there's a lot of, she uses sex as a crutch, and she was like a prodigy, and now she's just trying to survive, and that is intensely personal to me. Like, also in the same way that Red was a huge part of my growing up and my maturing, because it was an album that bridged that gap, if that makes sense. I don't know if anything I'm saying makes sense. I'm not clever enough for this, but you kind of get what I'm trying to say. Like, that sort of part of life where it's not the old part but it's not the new part, that's where Red sits to me in Taylor's discography, and that's what that book to me describes really well. 1989.
1989.
Welcome to New York. It's been waiting for you. Welcome to New York.
I mean, it's the album that first got me into Taylor Swift properly. I just love it so much. I listened to it last night, like all the way through on my CD player, and I was like, there's just not a single skip on that album for me. It's so good. But it's like the 80s bops, the fun romance time, but also like the moving on with your life, trying to get to where you want in life, like the Welcome to New York, while also trying to reconcile the things you've been through, and the breakups and the hard times, like the clean, yeah, just that whole album is just perfect. Of course, then you have to start with a perfect author, more Taylor Jenkins Reid. Malibu Rising is literally 1989. Like, it is set in the 80s, so immediately it has that going for it. It's about the Reaver family and their annual party. It's set in the same sort of universe as the other TJR books, so this is the latest in that. Again, just the most intense characters that make you cry your eyes out. It has the sort of poppy, fun vibes of 1989, while also like the softer songs and the things that make you think more deeply. And there is a part of this book, well, there's a character in this book that is Clean personified. Like, I know Clean is obviously more about the heartbreak and getting over a person, but if you'll know when you get to that part of the book, and you won't be able to ever listen to Clean without thinking of this character again. And this is my signed copy from Waterstones. This is my pride and joy. Okay, so technically the vibes in this are 70s, but it's like late 70s, so we'll kind of give it to them. Like, it's still the nostalgic, like, your parents vibe. And this is in One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, which again I talk about a lot because it's one of my favourites, and it's sapphic, which I am 900% sure that at least a couple of the songs of 1989 are about a sapphic relationship, because if you've been down the Wonderland rabbit hole without being a galer, it makes perfect sense. So it has that going for it. It has the sapphic vibes going for it, but this is speculative. It's about August, who meets Jane on the subway. I'm British, that's disgusting. It's the underground on the subway, but Jane is stuck in the 1970s, and it's about them falling in love and also trying to find a way to get Jane back into real life in the real timeline with August. Yeah, this is just kind of another personal one where the vibes to me just match it perfectly. Like, it has the really upbeat, love, fun times to it, you know. It has the Wonderland vibes, but also the softer vibes. And then just the idea that this little train carriage is their place. Like, you cannot tell me that's not I Know Places. Like, it's literally, they won't be found there. It's their special train carriage. The next one is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This is another kind of like time travel-y one. I don't know why 1989 gives me time travel vibes. I think it's because it's like 80s vibes. But this is a little bit different. It's about a woman who has a very set out 5-year plan, so she knows exactly what she's going to do, who she's going to marry. But then the next morning she wakes up and she is exactly 5 years on from where she fell asleep. She's with a completely different man, and she's got to work out how she got there. She's got to work out like the whole shebang. Proper beach read, like literary fiction, but in a really fun and also impactful and emotional way. A lot like the album. You listen to like You Are in Love or All You Had to Do Was Stay, and you're like, this is actually a lot sadder than you'd think it's gonna be. But yeah, I don't know, I listen to 1989 when I need like that fun comfort time vibes, but also a little bit of emotion. And then the final book is, again, I talk about Wonderland a lot. It's my favourite song on the album, so like I'm allowed. But it is Every Heart a Doorway by Shawnee Maguire. It's very short, it's like a little novella, but it is Wonderland on steroids. But also kind of has, again, I Know Places, Out of the Woods, that sort of, it's a very specific theme where it's like, it's the idea that these kids have found this perfect place. So like Alice goes to Wonderland, but when she comes back, no one believes her. No one believes what she's seen and she can't get back there. This is about all those other kids that go to their wonderlands, that go to these lands that are perfect for them, but they come back and they can't get back to where they fit in perfectly, and no one believes them that they've been there. It's about how these children, they're all in a big boarding school together. The idea that you found this perfect place, that you get ripped away from it, and then no one believes you about how special it was. That kind of vibe, I think, is so prominent on the 1989 album. Like so many songs like Wonderland or Clean or You Are in Love or All You Had to Do Was Stay or I Know Places, like all of those songs to me have that vibe where, but it's again very dark and whimsical, like Out of the Woods style, dark and whimsical, and the characters are so impactful, like the characters stay with you forever. But it's also very much about friendships. So if you don't really relate to 1989 in like the relationships way, if you look at some of the songs and relate them to friendships and the friendships in this book, I think it makes you look at them in a different way, but also really does reflect them. Reputation, my girl.
Reputation. He was a killer. First time that I saw him.
My angry Taylor. Yeah, just I love Reputation so much. And of course the first book that you've got to read if Reputation is your favourite Taylor Swift album is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Like, this is the most Reputation book. It is OG girl boss, like you do you queen, like men are trash, women are psychopaths and deserve to be. Amy Dunn is like feral, Look What You Made Me Do Taylor times 100. Also played by Rosamund Pike in the movie, so like perfect. It's just a brilliant book, but it's also I Did Something Bad and Look What You Made Me Do in a book. Like, I feel like everyone knows the plot to Gone Girl now, but yeah, feral girl boss, that vibe, that's what you're looking for. If that's why Reputation is your favourite, you've got to read Gone Girl. And then the next book is very similar to that, but kind of in a different way. Like, it's the same sort of girl boss men are trash, but in a very different way, and that is Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan. This is like female rage, so like I hate men, but in a really cool, like almost academic way, but it talks a lot about obsession and toxic relationships and the need for male validation, and it's very dark, kind of ready for it. Getaway Car, especially Getaway Car, oh my god. Like that story of mutual obsession and just this relationship that is just so toxic until it just completely erupts. That's this book. It has all the nuance and the beauty and some of the most incredible quotes, like, that give me Delicate vibes, if that makes sense. Like, that song is so nuanced and gorgeous and track 5-y that that's sort of what this book gives me as well. It's just the most ultimate Reputation vibe. And then the next one takes witchy girl boss again, but in a more wholesome way, which kind of like call it what you want, like This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, and that is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman, which is one of my favourite books ever, and even more than that, one of my favourite films. The book is kind of different to the film, but they still have that same like vibe to them. This is like witchy girl boss, but in a cottagecore environment. So soft, and it has the kind of swearing off men but falling in love when the right one comes along vibe that this album has, where Taylor talks about Joe, so like the So It Goes and the like Delicate and New Year's Day sort of vibes, where Sally swears off men because there's a curse on the Owens women that the men they fall in love with will die basically, but then the right one comes along, and that's what the vibe is in Reputation, you know, like men are trash except this one. That's this book. Gillian Owens, Sally's sister, is literally the personification of I Did Something Bad, the song. she's just feral. I love her so much. And then the last book is more witchy, but this is a lot more fantasy witchy than Practical Magic, which is kind of like magical realism. And that's Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. They're burning all the witches even if you aren't one. That is this book. Except you are a witch. It's like the story and proper enemies to lovers between a witch hunter and a witch. And it does have those impeccable girl boss end game, so it goes, like that sort of sexiness to it, that toxic sexiness that, like, yeah, it's incredible. Although not like dress levels of sexiness, because that is pure filth and also very sapphic. But anyway, Serpent and Dove absolutely gives me Reputation vibes, and if Reputation is your favourite album, you really should be reading Serpent and Dove. That sort of feral nature of Reputation, that's also The Ivies by Alexa Donne. This is more sort of teenage girls than like sort of older, like early 20s, that I feel like Reputation fits more. But it does kind of still come into that vibe for me, because it's about a group of girls at an elite boarding school. And one of our girls is not like from that background, she's on scholarship. They each get given like an Ivy League school that they can apply to, and then when the decisions come out, things get a little bit spicy, a little bit different. And someone ends up dead, and our main character has to figure out how, why, you know, that sort of thing. So it's just a good old murder mystery, but with a whole lot of commentary on privilege and hierarchy and society and patriarchy and all those good juicy things in a fun YA thriller. So it's more a rich people drama in the most feral way, the most girl boss, ready for it, look what you made me do way, but it also kind of ends leaving you incredibly mad at society. The ending is not like a satisfying, like it's a satisfying ending for the book, but not for like how you feel about things, if that makes sense. The way I kind of look at it that makes me think of Reputation is that all that Taylor went through to write that album, and then to put that album out after, you know, the whole snake thing, and then using it all, and then that clip of her not getting any Grammy nominations in Miss Americana. That's kind of like the ending of this book makes you feel, like all that work, all that discussion for nothing, for no external validation. That's why that gives me Reputation vibes. First of all, if Lover is your favourite Taylor Swift album, taste. That's all I'm gonna say, taste.
Lover, one of these things is not like the others, like a rainbow with all of the colors, baby doll.
It is so easily my favourite. I love it so much. Like loving being in love. I just love Lover so much. And obviously the first book has got to be like a YA cute contemporary love, because that's to me what Lover is all about. That is just loving being in love and falling in love. And of course the one I had to choose for this is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. This is the OG, ultimate, heartfelt, happy book about falling in love. It's so soft. Obviously now the movie's come out as well, so it's a lot more popular than it used to be, but it's just the ultimate YA contemporary romance. The most accurate, I think, to Lover. I love it. It's the sweetest, like, daylight, paper rings, even London Boy, but then it also has the link to, like, Soon You'll Get Better through Lara Jean's mum, who is sadly not with them anymore. The sisters, the relationship between the three sisters, all of it, just being in love. It's so soft. And that's what I think about when I think of Lover. So this is easily the most Lover book ever. And then another book about being in love is Read Between the Lines by Rachel Lacey, but this again is sapphic, which makes it even better. It's about a woman who runs a bookstore, and the woman who works for a property firm who is going to tear down that bookstore. But she is also a sapphic author in her spare time, and the woman who runs our bookstore is her favourite author, and they sort of chat online. So it's in the same way as it's an enemies to lovers, it's also a friends to lovers in the same book, which is so cool. The line in The Archer, because all my enemies started out as friends, that's where it gets to in the middle of the book. It's so good. But it's just wholesome, it's fun, it's got a happy ending, and it makes me want to be in love even though I am completely unlovable, which just is the vibe that Lover gives me. So I love this book so much. I can't wait to own a physical copy of this book. The next book has all the vibes but none of the nuance, kind of like the political statements that Taylor tries to make, that Taylor starts making on Lover, which is like the first album where she's really started to do that. So you have like the man and you need to calm down, which are both obvious, really obvious sentiments. Obvious, almost contrived, but like the more subtle Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince, that kind of vibe. And it's most likely by Sarah Watson, and it follows 4 girls, I think they're like best friends, who one of them you know is going to be the future president of the United States. And obviously then the book you're following them and you're trying to work out which one of them it's going to be, but it just follows their lives. It's also intensely relatable for me because it is like burnt out gifted kid realising you're really not that special. That's for all 4 of them. Like I feel like I relate to that in that. And it's just kind of a fun time, but with some political points being made, a lot like the album. So like it's a fun song, and if you think about it, yeah, like I get what you're trying to say, Taylor, but it's not exactly done in like the most nuanced way possible. That's kind of the vibe of this book. But it's still, like, it still stands, like the point still stands. The Comeback by Megan Nolan, this is like the 2 sides of the album. It's like if Taylor wrote The Man, but with the vibes of The Archer mushed together. That's this book. Like the vibes are so completely The Archer, but the story and the points it's trying to make are very much The Man. It's about the comeback of an actress who disappeared right as her career was about to start off, and she has to give an award to the director that basically was the reason for that. It makes you so mad, oh my god. And it's a really good book to bridge the gap between Reputation, which is more sort of feral, like I say, and Lover. It's a really good gap between those two. It's like, it's the more nuanced version of Most Likely as well, if that makes sense. And then the last one is The Astonishing Colour of After by Emily X. R. Pan, which is huge trigger warnings for mental health and suicide. It's a story of a young girl who copes with the grief of losing her mum to suicide. This book is for the people who don't skip Soon You'll Get Better. I have never listened to that song all the way through, but I know what it's about, and I've listened to the first couple of lines and I can't do it. My mum has breast cancer, so you can imagine. But this book is stunning. This book has some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read, which some of the songs on Lover do. We're not talking about You, London Boy. I'm talking about The Archer and Miss Americana and False God, that sort of gorgeous writing, but like with the atmosphere and the link to Soon You'll Get Better, of dealing with your mum going through something shitty in this case. I can't even say it out loud because it's too horrific for me, but it's stunning. The imagery is so gorgeous and the feelings are very intense. To me it's like the other side of Lover, the album. So Lover to me is there's a lot going on that album, but it's not about being in love. It's not about the activism, but it's about like the painful songs, basically. The Archer and Soon You'll Get Better and the gorgeous writing. And yeah, I have read, like, I can read this, I can't read this book now. If I was to read this book now, I don't think I could. I read it a long time ago. I have listened to Folklore probably like 5 times in the last 3 days. I'm absolutely obsessed at the moment.
Folklore, when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed.
Just the vibes are immaculate, and this album to me screams reading classics, Down by the Lake, the superiority complex that gives me, or sitting in the library annotating literature with a fountain pen. That's the vibes I get from this album. I think because of the literary references in it as well. But yeah, so a lot of these books are classics. If you love folklore, I feel like you love classics. Or at least you want to love classics. I feel like that's me. I want to love classics. The first one is House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. Like the quote that in the Long Pond sessions where Taylor's talking about Mad Woman, which says, oh, this is female rage. That's this book. It has that female rage. It's the story of Lily Bart. She's unmarried in a society where she really should be married. She has no money, and it's about her trying to basically salvage her life where she feels she failed. It will make you never want to get out of bed ever again, because it just makes you so angry, especially the film. Oh my god, Gillian Anderson plays Lily Bart in the film, and that's the only face I can make. It's witty and it's clever and it's funny, and it has all that sort of like cleverness that folklore has to it. And it portrays high society as exactly as toxic and as frustrating and as ridiculous as it actually was, giving the last great American dynasty, I should say dynasty, but I pronounce it dynasty because I'm British, but the last great American dynasty, that's, yeah, of course, because it is American, but set in New York City. But yeah, this fits so many songs on the album, but especially Mad Woman and Exile, too, quite obviously, but especially This Is Me Trying, because she just tries so hard throughout this book, It makes me want to cry thinking about it. Next one is A Room with a View, which is actually kind of short. It's by E.M. Forster. It has the most immaculate vibes. Like, we're talking Florence, Italy, like then we go to like Surrey, massive mansion houses. It's so good. It's so good. Also the movie Helena Bonham Carter. But the reason I think you would love this if you love folklore is because it is quite literally the ramblings of a middle-class woman, which I'm not saying that Taylor is a middle-class woman, but it's like those sort of thoughts that you never really see anywhere else. That's what folklore is for me. And also it's just, if you listen to The Lakes on repeat and read this book, that's the sort of vibes I'm getting. But it's, someone reviewed it once and said it was like the crossing of the of Italian passion with the Edwardian like propriety and decorum, and so that to me is, it's like the songs like Illicit Affairs and The One and Betty and August, like that sort of passion with The Lakes and This Is Me Trying and Mirrorball, where you're trying so desperately to fit into what they're expecting of you, and that's Lucy in this book. And that's why for me it's the ultimate folklore book, and just I love it so much. I love both of them. The next one I feel like is the most obvious. Like, it's so obvious, but it's Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Of course, it's the ultimate folklore book. Folklore could be like, I feel like the soundtrack to the movie, but the book is of course what we're talking about. The vibes, the atmosphere, the women. It's just folklore, and I feel like there's a song for each of the sisters in this book. Which one you choose for them kind of depends on who you relate to most out of the four sisters. But yeah, to me, folklore is Taylor's most beautiful album. This is the most beautiful book. They're so perfect together. They are so perfect together. And then you couldn't have an album with songs like Mad Woman and This Is Me Trying and Betty and not expect a Sylvia Plath book. So of course The Bell Jar. It's haunting, it's dark, it's harrowing, far too relatable for us mentally ill, sad bitches. Yeah, it just has that sort of quality of stunning prose, stunning writing, and being able to capture something that you've never really had captured before in words. So like This Is Me Trying or My Tears Ricochet captures such a specific feeling that so departs of The Bell Jar, if that makes sense. I feel like that's why a lot of people love folklore, is because it does capture something so clear and something that you don't really hear put into words very often, and that's similar to this book. But yeah, it's the most obvious. And of course, Mad Woman and Sylvia Plath, like that could be written about her. Does a scorpion sting when fighting back? It's so good. The last book is the only book that's not a classic on this, but it could be a modern classic. I'm just saying. It is The Nightingale by KRISTIN Hanna. This is like a historical epic. It's not that long, that makes it sound really long. It's not that long, but it will not ever leave you alone. If you liked The Book Thief, you'll love this book. There's a lot of trigger warnings for lots of different things. It's like, I've written in my notes, it's like the worst track 5 song ever. And I feel like My Tears Ricochet is up there as one of the best track 5 songs after The Archer. It gives off the old-timey vibes of the album, even though it's not a classic, and then the way that she weaves all the storylines together really is like an invisible string. It just all fits so perfectly with the album to me. Like, it's hard to explain how a book fits with folklore because it's such a ethereal album that it's hard to put into words, and all these books just fit the vibes, if you get me. It fits the vibes. Like, all the feels of Exile and My Tears Ricochet, that is in this book. It just makes you cry in the same way that folklore makes you cry when you hear it for the first time. And then when you like read it again, I can imagine, I haven't ever reread it, but if I reread it, I feel like it'll be like the same feeling as re-listening to folklore, where you're like screaming the songs and not really thinking about how much you cried the first time you listened to them, because it's just so good. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And then Taylor's last released original album until Taylor Swift had, Evermore.
Evermore, I come back stronger than a 90s trend.
Which is one of my favourites, like up there with Lover in 1989. It is impeccable to me. Evermore deserves all of the love. And the first book, like, to me, the way I see Evermore is it's just immaculate. So these are just some of my favourite books, to be honest. But the first one is so Evermore, and it's my favourite book of all time, and I talk about it all the time, and I'm going to talk about it again. It's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I love it so much, but the song Ivy and the parallels to this book don't even talk to me. Don't even talk to me. Like, Ivy is so sapphic, which kind of makes sense because we've all theorised it's based on Emily Dickinson's like letters, but the forbidden love, the way you can analyse Ivy as sapphic, this like hiding, losing out on all that time because you're supposed to be someone else, you're supposed to be with someone else to keep up appearances, that is Celia and Evelyn. Don't even talk about it. And then if you think about Celia and the song Right Where You Left Me, do not even, because Celia is right there waiting for Evelyn the whole time. I could write an essay about how this book fits with Ivy and the whole Evermore album, and the whole album to me is incredibly sapphic, and this book, I just love it, and I love that album, and they're so perfect for each other. This to me is like the most iconic pairing of all these book recommendations. The next is another classic sapphic book. Wow, this is a more classic sapphic book. It's Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. It's, I'm pretty sure it's like Welsh, but it's like a classic sapphic book, but about basically Victorian lesbians. It's about someone who forms as a man, falling in love with another woman, and the Ivy vibes, the forbidden love vibes. It's sexy, and there's deep longing and slow burn, and yeah, it's an iconic sapphic book. And because Evermore to me speaks so much to the sapphic experience, with songs like Ivy and Right Where You Left Me, and just so much of it does, so much of it, and Willow, and just, yeah, it's... And then the other side of the album, the side that is not like sapphic, which I know quite a few people are probably gonna be like, oh my god, I'm not trying to be a galer, I'm just saying, to me it speaks to my experience and to a lot of experience, like universal experience of sapphic women. So that's all I'm saying. But the next one has nothing to do with that, and it is The Furies by Katie Lowe. This is the witchy, atmospheric, dark academia vibes that Evermore absolutely gives. Teen girl rage, revenge, and like the storytelling vibes of Evermore. You've got a song like Nobody No Crime, you can't not have books like this on there. Nobody No Crime, Long Story Short, and Cowboy Like Me. Those are the songs that this book represents. It's a group of girls who go to a study group that end up studying witchcraft, solve a mystery together. It is perfect. It is perfect. Like the whole aesthetic of this book, with the album, the long woolen coats and the like plaited hair and academia, like the whole cottagecore thing, just fits so perfectly with this book. And also, like, I say it's not sapphic, but the teacher of the witchcraft group, I guess, she's called Annabelle, and I am in love with her. More Ivy vibes, of course. And then I couldn't not give a recommendation based on how amazing Nobody No Crime is, because to me it's like the summing up of the storytelling vibes of Evermore. Like it's such a story-centered album to me. And The Sinful Lives of Trophy Wives, which is the most amazing title, by KRISTIN Miller, is Nobody No Crime deserves its own recommendation, and that is this book. While it has all like the melodramatic drama, rich people vibes of Cowboy Like Me, it is quite literally following of women who are married to uber rich Silicon Valley men, and in a elite community. They all live in this elite community, and there is one woman who has been through like 3 husbands, and it's trying to work out who she really is, what secret she's hiding, the lengths that rich wives go to hide their secrets, protect them. They think she did it, but they just cannot prove it. That is the tagline, that should be the tagline of this book. And then the last book kind of speaks to the other vibes of the album for me. Not the like Nobody No Crime, Trophy Wives, that kind of vibe, but the rich people drama, men are trash, same sort of vibes, but like Champagne Problems, Tolerate It, Closure, those sort of vibes. Family of Liars, this is the arc, the coolest arc I've ever been sent, by E. Lockhart. It's the prequel to We Were Liars, and it speaks to scary women who deserved better, but also they're rich, so you don't really like them. Does that make sense? And it kind of goes deeper than that. The end of the album, obviously you end with Evermore, and Evermore is a very distinct track, and it's very sad. And the way this book ends and the way that album ends, the way you go into We Were Liars from this book is just like, this pain would be forevermore. And the end of this book, once you read this book, you'll know what I mean. And then if you know what happens in We Were Liars, you'll know what I mean. But the pain that she carries, you really should read it if you like Evermore, because rich people on boats on their own private island, bad stuff happens. This pain wouldn't be forevermore. Oh my god, I cannot express how much Evermore the song fits with this book, and also champagne problems, because this book is the definition of champagne problems. Like, all these problems happen to them because they are rich, and it's just a fun time. I feel like this is so much better than We Were Liars as well. If you liked We Were Liars for the vibes and the atmosphere, but like we're kind of expecting something else from it because of the hype, I think you might like this. I hope maybe you got a good recommendation out of this video. I just love talking about Taylor and I love talking about books, so like I had the best time filming it, and hopefully you got a good book to read, and I might see you next time. Maybe subscribe if you did, and of course drop a comment if you have any books that fit perfectly with Taylor albums or Taylor songs, because this is the extent of analysis that I'll go on. I will do no uni work. I will only analyse Taylor Swift songs and books and how they fit together. So yeah, I'll see you next time, and bye!